"Rancher, I came to marry you. I'm the Apache girl you saved 20 years ago." 20 years ago, the plains were wide and quiet, stretching far into the open sky. The wind whispered through the tall grasses, carrying the scent of wildflowers and the faint smell of smoke from distant campfires. In the midst of this vast land, a young Apache girl ran as fast as she could, her small feet pounding against the earth. Her heart raced, and her breath came in quick, uneven gasps. She was alone, and danger was closing in. A group of men had spotted her, and she knew she could not outrun them for long. Fear filled her chest like a storm cloud, and she stumbled, almost falling as her long braid caught on a low branch. She paused, trying to catch her breath, and looked around. The plains seemed endless, but there was no help in sight. She had been separated from her family during the hunt, and now she was vulnerable. Just as despair began to take hold, a figure appeared in the distance. It was a man, tall and sturdy, moving with quiet confidence. He wore a wide-brimmed hat and a worn leather coat, and he carried a rifle over his shoulder. The girl did not know who he was, but something about him made her stop in her tracks. His eyes were calm, steady, and kind. He called out, his voice gentle but firm, "Hey, little one, come here. It's safe." The girl hesitated, unsure if she could trust him. But the sound of the men's shouts behind her urged her forward. She ran toward him, slipping and sliding across the uneven ground until she finally reached him. The rancher caught her in his strong arms, lifting her just as the men approached. He held her tightly, shielding her with his own body. The men stopped, wary of this unexpected interruption, and after a tense moment they turned away, muttering threats as they disappeared into the horizon. The girl's body shook with relief, and she clung to the rancher without letting go. He gently set her down and looked into her wide, frightened eyes. "You're safe now," he said softly. "No one will hurt you while I am here." The girl nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. She could barely speak, but her gratitude was clear. The rancher offered her water from a small leather pouch he carried and a piece of bread. She accepted it silently, too overwhelmed to find words. He guided her to a nearby stream where she could wash the dust and sweat from her face. The cool water refreshed her, and she felt a small spark of hope ignite within her chest. The rancher sat beside her, watching quietly, making sure she was truly safe. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the rancher spoke again. "You must be far from home," he said. "Do you have anyone to take care of you?" The girl shook her head. She could not explain everything that had happened, not yet. She only knew that this man had saved her life, and that he was now the only person she could trust. The rancher understood and did not press further. Instead, he promised her that she would have a safe place to rest that night. He led her to a small cabin near his ranch. It was simple but sturdy, built from timber and stone, with a warm fireplace and a small bed covered in clean blankets. The girl hesitated at the door. She had never been inside a home like this before. The rancher noticed her apprehension and smiled gently. "It's safe. You can stay here tonight," he said. She nodded again, slowly stepping inside. The cabin smelled of wood smoke and leather, and the warmth of the fire made her shiver fade away. The rancher helped her settle on the bed, offering her a blanket. She curled up, still nervous but feeling a little more secure than she had in hours. The rancher sat nearby, keeping watch, his eyes scanning the horizon through the cabin window. Night fell, and the plains grew dark and silent, except for the occasional hoot of an owl or rustle of leaves. The girl lay awake, thinking about the events of the day. She remembered running, the men chasing her, the fear in her chest, and then the relief when the rancher appeared. She thought about her family and how she would find them again. Yet, despite the fear and uncertainty, she felt a strange comfort in the presence of the man who had saved her. His quiet strength and steady eyes gave her a sense of safety she had never felt before. The rancher, too, could not sleep. He thought about the small Apache girl lying in his cabin. She was brave, though scared, and there was something in her eyes that reminded him of the children he had once known in the nearby settlements. He wondered about her family, how they would be searching for her, and whether they were worried sick. He decided that, in the morning, he would help her find them. For now he kept a silent watch, listening to the wind and the distant sounds of the plains. Morning came and the sunlight streamed through the cabin window. The girl awoke to the smell of fresh bread and coffee. The rancher was already awake, preparing breakfast. He offered her food with a warm smile, and she accepted, her stomach too empty to refuse. They ate in silence at first, the girl quietly nibbling on bread while the rancher sipped his coffee. After a moment he spoke. "We need to get you back to your family," he said. "Do you know where they might be?" The girl shook her head, unsure of the exact location. The rancher nodded and said, "It's all right. We'll figure it out together." After breakfast, the rancher saddled his horse and helped the girl onto another. They rode across the plains, the wind in their hair, the sun warming their backs. The girl held on tightly, still nervous, but also feeling a sense of adventure. She had never ridden a horse before, not like this, and the rancher guided her patiently. Along the way, he asked her about her family, her village, and the journey that had brought her so far. She spoke little, but enough to give him clues about where they might find her people. Hours passed, and the plains seemed to stretch endlessly. The rancher never let her out of his sight. When they finally reached a small Apache settlement, the girl's face lit up with recognition. She urged the horse forward, tears of joy filling her eyes. Her family rushed to greet her, calling her name with relief and happiness. The rancher dismounted, smiling quietly as he watched the reunion. The girl ran into her mother's arms, then hugged her father and siblings. Her heart swelled with gratitude and love. The family turned to the rancher, their expressions a mixture of awe and thankfulness. They offered him gifts, food, and blessings for saving their daughter. The rancher humbly accepted, saying only that he was glad she was safe. The girl looked up at him one last time, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "I will never forget you." The rancher nodded, feeling a strange pull in his heart, though he did not fully understand it yet. He mounted his horse and rode back to his ranch, the memory of the girl staying with him. Back at the ranch, the rancher resumed his quiet life. Yet he often thought about the young girl he had saved. He wondered how she was growing, what adventures she was having, and whether she remembered him as he remembered her. The plains were wide and empty again, but the memory of that day brought warmth to his heart. He could not know that this small act of courage, a simple choice to help a child in need, would echo through the years in ways he could never imagine. 20 years had passed since that day, yet the bond formed between the rancher and the little Apache girl remained hidden in memory, quietly waiting for life to bring them together once more. Years passed since the day the rancher had saved the small Apache girl. Life on the plains continued as it always had, with the sun rising over the horizon, casting golden light across the endless fields, and the wind carrying the scent of wild grass and distant mountains. The rancher remained on his land, tending to his animals and fields, living the quiet life he had always known. He had never married. He worked from dawn until dusk, caring for his ranch with dedication, yet something in his heart often felt empty. He remembered the little girl he had saved, but he never spoke of it to anyone. It was a memory he carried quietly, tucked away in a corner of his mind. Meanwhile, the Apache girl had grown into a strong and capable young woman. Her life had not been easy. The memories of being separated from her family and rescued by the kind rancher stayed with her for years, shaping who she became. She learned to survive, to be brave, and to face challenges with courage. She grew skilled in riding horses, navigating the plains, and understanding the ways of nature around her. But even as she learned to live independently, she could never forget the man who had saved her life. He had been a stranger then, but to her he had represented safety, kindness, and hope. She often thought about him as she worked and trained herself. When she felt afraid, she remembered his steady voice and calm eyes. When she felt alone, she thought of the way he had held her and made her feel safe. These memories became a part of her, comforting her when the world seemed uncertain. She tried to continue her life, focusing on her family, her community, and her own future, but deep inside, a small wish lingered, a hope that one day she might see him again. The young woman grew into a thoughtful, intelligent, and determined person. She traveled to other villages to learn skills that would help her and her family, trading, helping others, and earning respect among her people. Yet she never forgot the plains, the ranch, and the man who had saved her. Sometimes, when she slept under the stars, she would close her eyes and imagine returning to the ranch, to the quiet life she had glimpsed as a child, to the man who had given her a chance to live. Back on the rancher's life remained simple but fulfilling. He rose every morning before sunrise, tending to his livestock, mending fences, and ensuring the land remained fertile and safe. He enjoyed the work, but he often felt the quiet of the plains pressing against him. There were times when he would sit by the barn at night, watching the stars, and think of the girl he had rescued. He wondered where she was, how she was growing, and whether she ever remembered him. He did not speak of it, for it was a private thought, one he kept close to his heart. As the years went on, the rancher found comfort in small routines, feeding the cattle, tending to the horses, fixing the wooden fences that marked the boundaries of his land. Neighbors and travelers sometimes visited, but few stayed long. His life was steady, predictable, and peaceful. Yet, when the night was quiet and the wind carried distant sounds across the plains, he would think of the girl he had saved, remembering her wide, fearful eyes and the way she had clung to him that day. The memory brought both warmth and longing, a gentle ache that he could not fully explain. Meanwhile, the young woman decided she needed to take control of her destiny. She had learned much over the years about survival, people, and herself. She realized that the man who had saved her long ago had left a mark on her heart, a mark she could no longer ignore. It was time to return. She wanted to see him again, to share her gratitude, and perhaps to find something she had longed for silently, a connection, a place she could call home, and a man who had once given her hope when she was most afraid. She prepared for the journey carefully. She packed supplies, food, and water. She saddled her horse and studied the path to the ranch, remembering what she had learned as a child and using the skills she had gained over the years. The journey would not be easy. There were rivers to cross, hills to climb, and open plains where the wind could make travel difficult, but she felt ready. Determined, she began riding toward the ranch that had once been her safe haven. Along the way, she met challenges that tested her skills and courage. She navigated through sudden storms, found her way when paths were blocked, and cared for her horse when it grew tired. Each obstacle reminded her of her childhood fear and the relief she had felt when the rancher had saved her. These memories gave her strength. She remembered the kindness in his eyes, the steady confidence that had kept her safe, and she pressed forward with renewed determination. As the journey continued, she thought about how much time had passed. 20 years had changed her, just as they had changed the rancher. She wondered how he had lived all these years, whether he had thought of her, and whether he would recognize her now. Her heart beat faster at the thought of finally reaching him. She also wondered what she would say, how she could explain the life she had lived, and how much gratitude she carried in her heart. The rancher, during those same years, remained unaware of her intentions. He lived his life thinking of her occasionally, but never imagining that she might return. He focused on the land, the animals, and the simple pleasures of his quiet existence. Yet sometimes, when he saw a young girl playing near the edge of a village or riding through the plains, he would catch a glimpse of her spirit, and a memory of that day would come rushing back. He would remember her small hands, her frightened eyes, and the courage she had shown in surviving. Finally, the young woman reached the hills that surrounded the ranch. She paused at the top, looking down at the land she remembered from childhood. The ranch lay before her, just as she had pictured it, with the small cabin, fences, and open fields stretching toward the horizon. Her heart swelled with anticipation and nervousness. She adjusted her saddle, took a deep breath, and began riding down toward the ranch, each step bringing her closer to the man who had saved her life so many years ago. As she approached the ranch, she saw movement in the fields. A figure tall and steady tended to the horses. The sight of him made her heart skip a beat. Could it really be him? She urged her horse forward, her pulse racing, her eyes fixed on the man who had lived in her memory for so long. The wind carried the scent of the plains, the smell of horses, and the promise of reunion. She felt a mixture of fear and hope, fear of rejection or misunderstanding, hope that he would remember her, hope that he would welcome her after all these years. The rancher, noticing the figure approaching, looked up from his work. He saw a young woman on horseback, moving steadily across the plains. There was something familiar about her, a presence that stirred memories long kept hidden. He stopped what he was doing, his heart beating faster than it had in years. Could the girl he had saved so long ago have returned? He watched as she drew nearer, her eyes focused, her posture confident, yet with a hint of the fear he remembered from her childhood. When she finally reached the ranch, she dismounted, tying her horse to the fence. She looked directly at the rancher, and for a moment neither spoke. Years of separation, growth, and change were in that silence. Then, in a quiet but steady voice, she said, "I am the Apache girl you saved 20 years ago. I have come back to see you." The rancher's eyes widened, and his breath caught. He took a step closer, his mind racing, memories flooding back like a river breaking its banks. The little girl he had rescued, now a young woman, stood before him, and the bond that had begun so long ago was suddenly real again. For the first time in years, the rancher felt a mixture of surprise, joy, and emotion he could not fully explain. He remembered every detail of that day, the fear in her eyes, the way she had clung to him, the gratitude that had shone through her silence. Now, all those memories returned with vivid clarity, mixed with the sight of the woman who had grown from the child he once knew. He realized that the connection formed that day had never truly ended. The young woman smiled softly, a mixture of relief and hope shining in her eyes. She had completed the journey, faced the plains, and returned to the place that had once been her safe haven. The rancher stepped forward, offering his hand, and for a moment the years melted away. They stood together on the open plains, two lives intertwined by fate, memory, and courage. The rancher understood that this reunion was the beginning of something new, a chance to build on the bond that had started 20 years ago, and the young woman felt the peace and fulfillment that had guided her journey across the land. The young woman stood at the edge of the ranch, the wind tugging at her hair and the plains stretching endlessly behind her. The rancher had paused in his work, his eyes fixed on her, trying to process what he was seeing. Time had passed, and she was no longer the small, frightened child he had rescued. She was taller, stronger, and carried herself with a quiet confidence that made him pause. For a moment, the rancher could only stare, unsure how to begin. The memories of 20 years ago flooded back, the dust, the fear in her eyes, the way she had clung to him. And now, standing before him, she seemed to embody all those memories and more. The young woman took a deep breath, feeling her heart pound in her chest. She had come a long way to reach this moment, facing the plains, the storms, and the uncertainty of what awaited her. And now that she was here, seeing the rancher again, she felt a mixture of relief, nervousness, and excitement. She had rehearsed what she would say during the journey, but now, standing in front of him, words seemed small compared to the weight of 20 years. She began. But the rancher raised his hand gently, stopping her. "Wait," he said softly. "You are the little girl I saved?" His voice trembled slightly, a mix of disbelief and emotion. The young woman nodded. "Yes," she said. "I have come back to see you." Her voice was steady, yet there was a hint of vulnerability, a trace of the child she once had been. The rancher took a step closer, studying her face. He remembered the wide eyes, the trembling hands, and the fear that had gripped her that day. But now he saw strength, courage, and determination. She had grown into a remarkable young woman, shaped by years of survival and life experiences, and yet beneath that strength, he sensed the same child he had once held in his arms. The connection they shared, formed in a moment of danger and kindness, was still alive. The young woman looked around the ranch, noticing how much it had changed and how much it had stayed the same. The fences were worn but sturdy, the barn stood tall, and the field stretched toward the horizon. She could imagine him working here for all these years, tending to the land, the animals, and the quiet life he had chosen. She felt a strange sense of familiarity, a feeling that she had returned not just to a place, but to a part of her own history. The rancher finally spoke again. "I never thought I would see you again," he admitted. "Not after all these years." The young woman smiled softly. "I never forgot you," she said. "You saved my life, and I have carried that with me every day." Her words were simple, yet full of meaning. The rancher felt a lump in his throat, realizing how deeply she had been affected by his actions, and how deeply he had been affected by her presence in his life. They spent the afternoon walking around the ranch together. The young woman listened as the rancher explained the routines, the work, and the animals. She asked questions not as a child learning from a stranger, but as an adult curious about a life she had glimpsed long ago. He showed her the horses, the barn, and the small cabin where she had spent her first night on the plains. Each place brought back memories, and the young woman could feel the connection growing stronger with every step. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, they sat on the porch of the cabin. Silence settled between them, comfortable and full of unspoken thoughts. The young woman turned to the rancher. "I wanted to see you," she said softly. "I wanted to thank you and to tell you that you changed my life." The rancher nodded, unsure what to say. He had never imagined that this day would come, and yet here it was. Night fell over the ranch, and the stars began to appear, scattered across the dark sky like tiny lights. The young woman felt a sense of peace she had not known in years. She had faced the plains, the journey, and now stood in the place where her life had changed so long ago. The rancher, too, felt a calm he had not felt in decades. There was a connection between them, a silent understanding that words could not fully capture. Over the next few days, they spent more time together. The young woman helped with the ranch work, feeding the animals, mending fences, and learning the rhythm of the land. The rancher watched her closely, impressed by her skills and determination. She was capable, brave, and thoughtful, yet there was a softness in her presence that reminded him of the child she had once been. Each day they talked more, sharing stories of the years they had spent apart. The rancher spoke of the land, the animals, and the quiet moments that had filled his life. The young woman shared her journey, her growth, and the experiences that had shaped her into the person she was now. As they worked and talked, a bond began to grow stronger. It was not just the memory of that fateful day 20 years ago, it was the shared respect, understanding, and trust that developed naturally between them. The rancher realized that he had always cared for her, even when she was just a child. The young woman felt the same, recognizing the kindness and strength that had guided her life. Together they found comfort and familiarity, a connection that neither could fully explain but both felt deeply. One afternoon, as they repaired a fence near the edge of the property, the young woman paused to rest. She looked out over the plains, her mind wandering to the years of travel, learning, and growth that had brought her here. She turned to the rancher and asked, "Did you ever think about me, after all these years?" The rancher hesitated, then nodded. I did," he admitted. "Sometimes I would see a child or a young girl and think, it might be her, but I never knew if I would see you again." The young woman smiled softly, her heart swelling with emotion. They continued to spend time together, sharing meals, stories, and quiet moments. The young woman learned the rhythm of the ranch, and the rancher grew to admire her resilience, intelligence, and warmth. Each day their bond deepened, shaped by shared experiences and mutual respect. The memory of the past combined with the present created a connection that was both familiar and new. As the days turned into a week, the young woman realized that her feelings were more than gratitude or admiration. She cared for the rancher deeply, and she wanted to be part of his life, not just as a visitor, but as someone who could share the land, the work, and the quiet moments that filled his days. The rancher, too, felt emotions he had not expected, an affection, a longing, and a recognition that the bond they shared was special and rare. One evening, as the sun dipped low, casting a warm golden glow across the plains, they sat together on the porch. The young woman turned to the rancher, her eyes reflecting the colors of the sky. "I came back for more than memories," she said softly. "I wanted to see you, and to be near you again." The rancher looked at her, his heart heavy with emotion. He realized that this moment, this reunion, was more than chance. It was the continuation of a story that had begun 20 years ago. The young woman smiled, a mixture of hope and courage shining in her eyes. "I have traveled far," she continued, "and I have faced many challenges. But I knew I had to come back." The rancher nodded, understanding the depth of her journey, both physical and emotional. He reached out, gently taking her hand, and for a moment the years melted away. They were two people bound by fate, memory, and courage, standing together on the plains where their lives had first connected. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind, the rustle of the grasses, and the distant calls of animals across the plains. The young woman felt a sense of belonging, a feeling she had not known in years. The rancher felt the same, a warmth in his heart that he had not felt since that long-ago day when he had saved her. Together, they realized that their connection had endured, quietly waiting for the right moment to return. As night fell, they retired to the cabin, sharing a simple meal and talking late into the evening. The young woman spoke of her journey, her experiences, and the lessons she had learned. The rancher shared stories of the ranch, the animals, and the quiet life he had led. They laughed, remembered, and discovered new facets of each other, building a bond that was both old and new. The connection between them, formed in childhood, had grown into a foundation of respect, trust, and affection. By the end of the week, it was clear that their reunion was more than a simple visit. The young woman's presence brought light, warmth, and companionship to the rancher's life. The rancher's guidance, kindness, and steady presence gave her a sense of safety and belonging she had longed for. Together, they faced the rhythms of daily life, shared stories, and strengthened the bond that had begun 20 years ago. The rancher realized that the young woman had returned for more than memories. She had come to be part of his life, to share his days, and to build a connection that had been quietly waiting to grow. The young woman understood that the rancher's heart, shaped by years of solitude and work, had room for her, just as heart had always held a place for him. They had found each other again, and now the journey of reunion and understanding began. The days passed slowly on the ranch, yet each one was filled with small moments that deepened the bond between the rancher and the young woman. They worked side by side, tending to the animals, fixing fences, and managing the fields. The young woman's hands were skilled and steady, and the rancher watched with quiet admiration as she handled each task with confidence. She was strong, independent, and careful, yet there was a softness to her, a warmth that reminded him of the child he had once rescued. Every glance, every shared smile, carried with it the memory of the past and the promise of something more in the present. One morning, the young woman rose before the sun, as she had done many times during her travels. She stepped outside, letting the cool morning air brush against her face, and looked out over the plains. The wind rustled the tall grasses, and the distant mountains glowed with the first rays of light. She thought about the journey she had taken to return to the rancher, about the years she had spent growing, learning, and preparing for this reunion. Her heart beat fast, both with excitement and nervousness. Today she knew she would speak words she had held inside for so long. The rancher noticed her standing quietly in the morning light and joined her. He stood a few steps away, giving her space, yet his presence was comforting and familiar. "It's a beautiful morning," he said softly, his voice steady but carrying a note of curiosity. The young woman turned to him, her eyes reflecting the golden glow of the sunrise. "Yes," she said, "it feels like everything has led to this moment." She paused, taking a deep breath. "I came here for more than work or memories. I came for you." The rancher's eyes widened slightly, and his heart skipped a beat. He had suspected, as the days passed, that her return carried deeper meaning, but hearing her say it aloud brought a mixture of surprise and emotion he had not expected. He looked at her closely, noticing the courage in her eyes, the steady confidence that had grown over the years, and the warmth that had always been there beneath her strength. "You, for me?" he asked softly, unsure how to respond.
The young woman nodded. "Yes," she said.
"You saved my life when I was just a child. You gave me hope, safety, and a chance to live. I have never forgotten that. And over the years, I realized I wanted to be close to you again, to share my life with you, if you would allow it." She looked down briefly, then back up, her gaze unwavering. "I am here because of you, and because of what you gave me. I want to be part of your life." The rancher was silent for a long moment, letting her words sink in. His mind raced through memories, emotions, and the reality of the moment. 20 years had passed since he had first held her, saved her from danger, and watched her disappear back into the world. He had thought of her often, wondering where life had taken her, imagining the person she had become. And now she stood before him, strong, brave, and speaking words he had never dared to hope for. His chest tightened, and he felt a warmth spread through him that he had not known in decades. Finally he spoke, his voice low and steady. I never imagined this day would come," he said. "I have thought of you so many times, wondered where you were, how you were growing, and what life had given you. And now, here you are." He paused, swallowing hard. "You have come back for me?" The young woman nodded, a soft smile on her lips. "Yes," she said. "I wanted to find you, to be with you, and to tell you that I am grateful for everything you did for me." Tears formed in the rancher's eyes, though he quickly blinked them away. He had faced many challenges in his life, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. He looked at the young woman, the child he had once rescued and the woman she had become, and he realized that the bond they shared had never faded. It had remained quietly waiting for the right moment, and now it was stronger than ever. You honor me with your words," he said softly. I never thought this could happen." The young woman stepped closer, her hand reaching out toward him. "I had to come," she said. "I had to tell you how much you meant to me, how much you shaped my life, and how much I want to share my life with you now. I am not the same child you saved, but I am still the girl who remembers you, who trusts you, and who cares for you deeply." The rancher took her hand gently in his, feeling the warmth and firmness of her grip. The connection between them was immediate, unspoken, and undeniable. For the next few days, they spent every moment together, speaking of the past, the present, and the future. The young woman shared stories of her travels, the skills she had learned, and the life she had built for herself. The rancher listened, amazed at her courage, intelligence, and resilience. He shared stories of the ranch, the animals, and the quiet life he had led, and she listened with fascination, discovering aspects of his life she had only imagined as a child. With each story, each conversation, the bond between them deepened, growing stronger with understanding, respect, and affection. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the young woman suggested a walk through the fields. They moved slowly, side by side, letting the evening air brush against their faces. The rancher noticed the way she looked at the land, her curiosity and appreciation for every detail. "You have a way of seeing the world," he said softly. "You notice things others might miss." She smiled. "I have learned to pay attention," she said, "and to appreciate the moments that matter most." They reached a small hill overlooking the ranch, where the plains stretched endlessly toward the mountains. The young woman turned to the rancher, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "I have something to ask you," she said softly. "Something important." The rancher looked at her, his heart beating faster. "What is it?" he asked gently.
"I want to stay," she said.
"Not just for a visit, not just for a few days. I want to be here with you, to share my life, to build a future together." The rancher felt a rush of emotions. Joy, relief, hope, and a quiet longing he had kept buried for so long. He realized that he had always cared for her, even when she was just a child. And now, hearing her words, seeing the woman she had become, he understood that their bond had endured, quietly waiting for this moment. You want to stay?" he asked softly. She nodded, her gaze steady and sincere. "Yes," she said. "I want to be with you, if you will have me." The rancher felt tears form in his eyes, and he took her hands in his. I have always admired you," he said. "Even as a child, even after all these years, I never forgot you. And now, to hear you say this, I cannot imagine my life without you." The young woman smiled, a mixture of happiness and relief washing over her. They stood together, holding hands, feeling the connection that had begun 20 years ago and had grown stronger with every passing day. The following days were filled with planning and preparation. The young woman settled into the ranch, learning the daily routines and working alongside the rancher. They shared meals, laughter, and quiet moments, discovering the rhythm of life together. The rancher marveled at her skills, her intelligence, and her warmth. He realized that this partnership was more than he had ever hoped for, a true bond of respect, trust, and love. One afternoon, as they repaired a section of fence near the barn, the rancher paused and looked at her. "You have brought life to this ranch," he said softly. "I never realized how much I needed someone like you here." She smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "And you have given me a home," she said, "a place to belong and someone to trust." Their eyes met, and for a long moment they simply stood there, sharing a silence filled with understanding and emotion. As the sun set that evening, painting the plains in shades of orange and gold, the young woman spoke again. "I am here because of you," she said softly. "Because of what you did for me 20 years ago, I have carried that day with me always, and it brought me back to you." The rancher nodded, feeling the depth of her words. "And I have carried the memory of you," he said. "Every day, every season. I never knew you would return, but now that you have, I feel whole again." They spent the night talking, sharing dreams, and planning the future. The young woman realized that her journey was not just about returning to the rancher, but about creating a life together, building something lasting and meaningful. The rancher understood that the bond formed in childhood had transformed into love, trust, and companionship. Together, they had found each other again, and now they were ready to face the future, side by side. The days on the ranch became brighter and fuller as the young woman settled into the life she had come back to create. She moved with ease across the fields, helping the rancher with the animals, mending fences, and preparing meals. Every task she performed carried a quiet grace, a mixture of strength and care. The rancher watched her closely, impressed by her skills, her calmness, and the way she seemed to belong to the land as naturally as he did. It was clear that she had not only returned for him, but had become a part of the ranch itself. Each morning they rose early to tend to the animals. She fed the horses and cattle alongside him, learning the rhythms of ranch life. The rancher taught her small tricks and techniques that came from years of experience. In return, she offered suggestions, noticing details he might have missed in his daily routine. Their conversations were easy and natural, filled with laughter, stories, and quiet moments of understanding. There was no need for pretense or formality. They simply shared their days, finding comfort in each other's company. The young woman often walked the ranch with the rancher at sunset, the sky turning soft shades of gold and pink over the endless plains. They spoke of their past, their experiences, and their hopes for the future. She told him of the journey that had brought her back, the lessons she had learned, and the people she had met along the way. He listened attentively, marveling at her courage, intelligence, and determination. Each story she shared deepened his admiration and affection for her, reminding him of why he had saved her so many years ago, and why he felt so strongly connected to her now. One afternoon they repaired a section of fence near the barn. As they worked side by side, the rancher paused and looked at her. "I never imagined," he said softly, "that you would return and bring your life to this ranch. I never imagined that I would find someone I care for so deeply, someone who understands and shares this life with me." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the sun's warm glow. "I came back because I had to," she said. "Because you gave me a chance to live, and I wanted to show you that your kindness mattered. I wanted to be part of your life, just as you have always been part of mine." They spent the evening together in the cabin, sharing a simple meal and talking about the years they had spent apart. The young woman spoke of the people she had met, the skills she had learned, and the challenges she had faced. The rancher listened, amazed at the life she had built and the resilience she had shown. He realized that the girl he had rescued had grown into a remarkable woman, one whose strength and courage matched the beauty and kindness she carried within. As night fell, the rancher and the young woman sat by the fireplace, watching the flames dance and listening to the quiet hum of the ranch. The plains outside were calm, bathed in the silver light of the moon. She reached out and took his hand gently, feeling the warmth and familiarity that had grown between them. "I want to stay," she said softly, "not just for now, but always. I want to share my life with you, to be by your side through the days and seasons that come." The rancher's eyes filled with tears, and he squeezed her hand. I have waited for this moment longer than I realized," he said. "I never thought that the little girl I saved would return, and yet here you are, offering me your life, your trust, and your heart. I cannot imagine living without you now." A sense of peace settled over them, the kind that comes when long-held emotions are finally spoken aloud and shared. Over the following weeks, they planned for their future together. The young woman fully integrated into life on the ranch, taking on responsibilities, learning more about the land, and sharing in the joys and challenges of each day. They found joy in the simple things, feeding the animals, walking through the fields, watching sunsets, and sharing quiet meals in the cabin. Their bond grew stronger with every passing day, rooted in respect, gratitude, and the deep connection formed 20 years ago. The rancher began to see her not just as the girl he had saved, but as a partner, an equal, and someone he could rely on completely. He marveled at her independence, her intelligence, and her warmth. She, in turn, admired his strength, patience, and steady presence. Together, they balanced each other, creating a rhythm of life that was both comforting and invigorating. The past and present intertwined, creating a foundation for a future filled with hope, trust, and love. One evening, as the sky turned orange and pink with the setting sun, the young woman turned to the rancher. "I want to make this official," she said softly, her eyes shining. "I want to be with you not just in words or actions, but in life. I want to marry you." The rancher felt a rush of emotion, a mixture of joy, relief, and love that he could hardly put into words. He took her hands in his eyes meeting hers with certainty and warmth. "I would be honored," he said. "I have always cared for you, and now I know that my life is meant to be shared with you." They spent the next days preparing for their union. Friends from nearby settlements and members of her community came to witness their commitment, bringing gifts, blessings, and smiles. The ranch was filled with laughter, music, and celebration. The young woman wore a simple yet beautiful dress, her hair braided with small flowers from the fields. The rancher, in his worn coat and hat, looked at her with admiration and love. They exchanged vows under the wide open sky, the plains stretching endlessly around them, and the wind carrying their promises across the land. After the ceremony, they returned to the cabin, their hands intertwined, hearts full, and spirits light. The rancher finally felt complete, having found the person he had unknowingly waited for all these years. The young woman felt a sense of fulfillment, having returned to the place that had shaped her and found the man who had saved her. Together, they looked out over the plains, knowing that their lives were now intertwined in a bond that had begun 20 years ago and had grown stronger with time, trust, and love. Life continued on the ranch, filled with shared work, quiet moments, and laughter. They faced challenges together, the harsh seasons, the occasional sickness of animals, and the demands of ranch life. But they did so side by side, each supporting the other. The young woman's skills, courage, and wisdom complemented the rancher's experience, strength, and steady guidance. Their partnership was complete, built on years of separation, shared memories, and the deep understanding that comes from surviving life's tests together. Evenings were spent sitting on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon and the stars appear one by one. They spoke of the past, laughed about small adventures, and dreamed of the future. Each day reinforced the bond they had formed, the gratitude they felt for each other, and the love that had quietly grown over the years. The young woman often remembered her childhood fear and how the rancher's kindness had changed everything. She now realized that the act of saving her had created a ripple that shaped both of their lives, bringing them together at the perfect time. The rancher, too, reflected on the journey of the past 20 years. He realized that saving the small Apache girl had been more than an act of courage. It had been the start of a connection that had changed both of their lives. He admired the woman she had become, her independence, her strength, and the warmth she brought to his life. He knew that the bond they shared was rare and precious, something that had endured through time, distance, and uncertainty. As the months passed, their life together settled into a steady, fulfilling rhythm. They rose early to tend the land, worked together through the day, and shared quiet evenings under the stars. The young woman became a true partner in every sense, her presence bringing energy, wisdom, and companionship to the rancher's life. He found joy in her laughter, comfort in her presence, and a sense of peace he had never known before. Occasionally they would sit together in the fields, watching the sunset, and speak of their past experiences and dreams for the future. The young woman would tell stories of her journey, the lessons she had learned, and the adventures she had faced. The rancher would share memories of the land, the animals, and the quiet moments of reflection he had experienced over the years. Together, they celebrated life, each other, and the bond that had endured for decades. In the end, the young woman who had once been a frightened child found a home, a partner, and a life she could cherish. The rancher, who had once saved a life on the plains, found love, companionship, and a renewed sense of purpose. Their story, which had begun 20 years ago with a single act of courage, had grown into a life of connection, trust, and deep love. Together, they faced the days and seasons ahead, knowing that the bond they shared was unbreakable, filled with gratitude and guided by the memory of that fateful day when their lives first intertwined. As the sun set on the plains, casting golden light over the fields and the cabin, they stood side by side, hands entwined, hearts full, and spirits connected. The rancher had found his family, and the young woman had found her home. Together they watched the wind sweep across the tall grasses, the animals grazing peacefully, and the stars beginning to appear in the vast night sky. Life on the ranch continued, now richer, warmer, and filled with love. Their journey had come full circle, from rescue to reunion, and finally, to a life shared together in harmony, trust, and enduring affection.